everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters, and enthusiasts like Josh and myself. I am myself, Dan.
And I am myself, Josh.
There we go. On today's podcast, we will be discussing all things ecumenical and theological, because we're going to talk about the Passions and some Questors.
We are going to actually talk about the Earthdawn-related stuff and not the classic REM hit, Talk About the Passion.
No, we're not. Aside from that, if you have any questions for us after this episode is done, or before you hear this episode and have a question about something else you want to talk to us about, or would like us to answer for you, please email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
And before we get into our discussion for this episode, I do want to mention, within a couple of days after this episode going live, the weekend of February 19th through 21st of 2021, Facet Games is hosting FreedoniaCon, which is a free online convention dedicated to all of FASA's current stuff. We'll have online games that people will be able to play. We've got not only FASA staff that is running games, but also, I imagine, some other folks are volunteering to run games of stuff online.
I am not, but are you?
I am running one session on Saturday, the 20th. It is likely to already be booked up by the time you hear this, unfortunately. But in addition to that, we've also got streaming events that are going to be done on our Discord, but also streamed simultaneously to our the Facet Games Twitch channel. Ross is going to take folks on a tour of the storage unit where all of the archived stuff is located.
Wow.
Friday night, late Friday night, as sort of like the closing event for Friday's stuff, I am going to be live streaming a reading of some Earthdawn related fiction. I am not 100% sure exactly what that will be as of this recording.
So email in your suggestions, folks.
Well, I will probably have made the decision by that point. And then Sunday, as one of the final events of the weekend, Sunday the 21st, Dan and I will be live recording what will be the next episode here in the feed. And that is the one that we're going to be answering emails that we have received since our last email session, and time and interest permitting, answering questions from folks in chat and things like that. There's another panel that I'm doing on Sunday with Cliff from the Legends of Earthdawn podcast. I'm trying to see whether we're going to get other members of the cast and it's going to be a Legends kind of focused show, or whether I'm going to get a couple of other people who do live stream / podcast Earthdawn games and maybe do like a podcasting type panel. I'm still waiting to hear back on some of that. So, and then anything that you might have missed, if you are hearing this after that event took place, or you've got other stuff going on and you can't catch, there's something you want to watch, we want to catch. These are all planning to be recorded and should be made available eventually on the Facet Games YouTube channel.
Very cool.
Go to facetgames.com. Check that out if you are at all interested.
If you're listening to this, I assume they are, but that's just me. I am. Now that I know Ross is going to lead us through the storage warehouse.
Yeah,
I'm not
awesome.
Sure. Oh,
I'm not sure. Hold on. What day?
Because I may not be able to do it live, but I will at least be able to, watch after the fact.
5 p.m. Central on Saturday the 20th. Ross Archives. And there are not any games blocked during that time. The sort of early afternoon session wraps up at 5 p.m. Central. And then the next block doesn't start until 6 p.m. Central. So there is an hour break sort of in between there.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds like a fun weekend.
Yeah.
And if you can't do it all live, like you said, watch the recordings later, because I will be doing that. I got a hot date that day. And then I got a hot date with Josh on Sunday as well to talk to you fine folks. So on to the passions, because we're going to talk about 2 different passions today and 2 different questers. Of the 12, I can't say paired them off, but I paired them off a little bit. So we're going to go through kind of what each passion represents and how a game master can work in something along those lines into their campaign, is a little side bit or major quest. And then we're going to talk about the questers that can follow those passions that the players can develop their characters into becoming a quester of, and how to work that into the campaign as well. And then some of the powers they kind of get, that's a cool, neat little,
some of the special,
passion-y. Yeah. So
stuff.
All of that goodness is forthcoming. So let's kind of give an overview on passions in general, since this is our first one of a 6-part erratic series.
Well,
hopefully 6-part.
Hopefully 6-part.
We'll see how long this takes.
Well, we'll see if it ends up like we end up talking about other stuff more and end up needing more bits on that. The passions are Earthdawn's equivalent of deities. If you're coming to things from a more traditional Dungeons and Dragons paradigm, the passions kind of serve that same role. There are a couple of notable differences. One of them being that, unlike in traditional D&D style fantasy worlds, like the Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or something like that, there aren't really organized large religious organizations that are devoted to worship of a particular passion. There are groups that will form, or small cults or whatever, that will, maybe join together, in a common cause. Like, for example, we're going to be talking about Jaspree as one of them. There is an organization, a small group of Questors of Jaspree that are based out of a town on the edge of the Badlands and are all kind of devoted together in common cause of investigating and potentially curing the Badlands. So you can have Questors working together, but there is not really any major overarching religious organization the same way that you would think of as a traditional like Western church or denomination or something like that, where there are high priests and things like that. The passions, at least within Barsave, are seen to be representations of certain Namegiver ideals and express powers and can grant powers to individuals based on and related to those ideals. In a way, they're kind of, you can think of them maybe as a little bit analogous to the Greek or Roman pantheon, where individual deities sort of had a portfolio with thing that they were associated with. But the true nature of the passions is not really understood. They are clearly real because people have had experiences with them, and there are individuals who are able to express power as a result of their devotion to the ideals of a particular passion. But what they actually are, whether they are something that is created by Namegivers as an expression of Namegiverness on the magical fabric of the universe, or whether they are separate beings that are somehow tied to Namegivers, it's all a bit of a big mystery, intentionally so. And my essay at the beginning of the Questors sourcebook talking about the nature of the passions intentionally does not answer those questions.
I liked that essay. I really did. It was indeterminate on purpose, and I like the fact that it was one of those, this is too much information to know. Are they spirits? Are they astral entities? Are they just the embodiment, magical embodiment of people's desires to have them actually exist? But as you said, they are real because they do bestow powers, and not in the traditional sense that a discipline does, where you have to work at it, you have to learn from somebody else. They just come down and say, you've done this well enough. Bing, here's your power, and here's how to use it. And they guide people by giving them visions as to what they need to do next for the next power or the next set of denomination or devotion points and so forth. So on to Astendar. We're going to start alphabetically, I think is not a bad way to do that.
You're the one who put together the list, man.
So Josh lets me have a little bit of free reign every once in a while. I'm kidding. A lot of the time. So because I need to prep for the show and Josh does not. So I get to surprise him. And every once in a while when he's like, I need more prep, then we back off. But otherwise, I need to refresh my memory on everything we're talking about. So Astendar is the passion of love, art, and music. You know, most things beautiful in this world. Jaspree's the other half, by the way. But it's most of the things that name givers can contribute to love, art, and music. So it's nothing to do with nature. That's all Jaspree. But they, the elements that they are, that Astendar is associated with are things like light rain and music and a melody and beautiful clothes and textures. So again, most things Namegiver created. So Astendar is their inspiration for and their creative spark therein.
Yeah. We're probably going to do this off and on with some of these. Astendar can, and forgive me for being so
That's
Western with this. Astendar can kind of be seen as taking some aspects of Aphrodite, Cupid, Apollo in some respects. Apollo with his association with the lyre from Greek myth. So there's all that kind of aspects of things. But Astendar is the one associated with the creative arts. Music, painting, beauty is another sort of aspect of Astendar. Love, whether physical or romantic and creative, love or whatever.
And creative inspiration.
And the creative inspiration thereof. The Muses would be something else that you could kind of draw on to be inspiration in relating to Astendar. There are some aspects of, when we talk about love, it is largely sort of physical and romantic love, whereas Garland is more strongly associated with filial love, which is to say love of family and so forth. So Astendar is the one that, if you go back and you look at the Legends books, Dan might have actually read one of them. There are some stories in other parts about
Astendar's devotion.
Lovers who are separated, and Astendar.
That was one of the Legends put out a few episodes ago.
Basically like Astendar intervening and working to bring lovers together. If Astendar were involved in Romeo and Juliet, there would have been some big dramatic thing and they would not have died at the end.
True.
Because Astendar would have gotten involved and tried to turn things around. But Astendar would be the passion that would be most commonly associated with some aspects, if we're going to kind of tie them into player characters, would be like Troubadours are typically strongly associated with Astendar. Swordmasters in their own way as well, particularly the more gallant type. There's a very strong sort of social and societal aspect of Astendar. Often devotees of Astendar can be seen as somewhat, perhaps a little frivolous,
flighty,
a little head in the clouds, a little overly romantic,
sappy.
That's kind of everything that's associated with the passion.
They've got, and by all means, this is a passion. This is a pseudo deity, so they're not weaklings. They've actually got some massive amounts of powers that they can do as well. So Astendar himself, herself, because they always appear in whatever form they need to take on. They are deities after all. Can entrance someone with music. They can instill in one person, a pair, a couple, a crowd of people, lust or love, not hate. It's always, beautiful things. And Astendar can also, restore youth. They can make you younger and more lively. But they, like I said, they also are that bit of creative inspiration. If you have the means to pottery, painting, drawings of any kind, sculpting, even dancing a little bit, not so much revelry, that's somebody else.
And this is in contrast to the crafting and construction of Upandal, who also has some creative aspects to it, but Upandals are more about structures and society and more practical, for lack of a better term, more practical creation, bridges and buildings and walls and those sorts of more civil engineering construction and creativity. Yeah, as opposed to, again, the as some people would put it, more flighty and unnecessary aspects of art and creativity, which is, of course, awful because art is super important.
It's anybody who's had to quarantine, anybody who's had to self-isolate, has had to do, whatever they could to get through it. And your music, your movies, your books, your poetry, your creative inspiration, your sewing, all of these arts are Astendar's playgrounds that he inspired you to draw from to get through the tough times that you have. And so art saves everybody. And this is Astendar's main playground to play with. So most of the questers of Astendar would, of course, be somebody who's exploring the arts in any way. Song, dance, creativity, painting, like we said. And it's not always adepts either, by the way. So if you're going to, as a game master, if you're going to work in Astendar in some way, you could always have your party encounter somebody who is not an adept, but is a quester of Astendar, or maybe, according to some of the legends that we've put out before, they could just have Astendar intervene in some way. Ideas, Josh?
I would actually, the way that I would put it, we've never really discussed like what percentage of the population would be questors. The advantage that questors have over adepts in one sense is that, in theory, anybody who is capable of being devoted to the ideals of a single passion is capable of becoming a questor. And so, in that sense, I would think that questors would tend to be a little bit more common than adepts. Maybe not too much more common, but I actually think that of the number of questors, a small portion of them are adepts as well. Yeah. Again, when we're talking about player characters, most of the player characters are going to be a combination of adept and questor. The systems and game rules for them are not really designed for them to be equivalent to an adept without other stuff on top of it. But generally speaking, within the setting, questors that are also adepts make up a small portion of the total number of questors, though there may not be a lot of them out there. My gut would say roughly equivalent numbers of total questors compared to total adepts, perhaps. But of that number, only a fraction are adepts.
I love the line from the original player's guide: hide from magicians, hire adepts, and say hello to questors.
Yeah, questors are... Backtrack, trying to figure out how to approach this. Adepts, especially in smaller settlements. Like in cities, adepts are probably a little bit more common and people would be used to seeing them. But in smaller settlements and things like that, frequently adepts show up when there is trouble or when there is about to be trouble. Questors, because they are representatives of the passions and those ideals that the passions represent that make up a strong, robust, positive society, like they are that connection between the mundane and the spiritual. And so in a similar way that in the past, life revolved in some respects around the spiritual, or, the rituals of life and birth and marriage and death and the harvest and the planting and all of that other stuff all kind of revolved around whatever religious practices happened to be prominent in that area. And the stories that would be told and the legends and the cultural practices that kind of carried on as a result of that all revolved heavily around spirituality and that sort of thing. Questors fill that role within Barsavian society. They sort of represent that connection between the mortal and the divine, the mundane and the supernatural, and one that is not the threat that many adepts represent when they show up somewhere.
Fair. So how would you work in, being game master, how would you work in how to introduce I could say a veteran party, but a not newbie and not novice party, to the idea of either Astendar's intervention or a quester of Astendar, and laying the groundwork to see if anybody would follow that secondary path, along with the discipline.
So I want to talk about a story, like kind of using them, perhaps tying in as a game master to maybe tie them into an adventure. So I've talked in the past about my romantic comedy featuring orcs adventure. That is one that, although in the original write-up of that, does not have any appearance or real influence by Astendar, that is a story that Astendar or a questor of Astendar would absolutely be interested in becoming involved with, because you're dealing with a romantic couple who are being potentially divided and torn apart by their families and the complications and things that can kind of go along with that. So that's the sort of thing where you're dealing less with a traditional type of adventure when you think of adventure categories. It's more of a social role-playing, political kinds of things. Perhaps there's a situation where a couple, perhaps some high-ranking merchant household or noble family or something like that, where the couple is having difficulties in one way or another. Or perhaps it was an arranged marriage that is not going well because of that, and maybe one party or the other who feels strongly and the other one doesn't wants the group to do something to perhaps obtain the blessing of a representative of Astendar to come and perhaps do something to rekindle or to ignite the romantic spark between them. Obviously, being careful about issues of consent and etc. We won't really get into that, but throwing up the caution flag on that.
I would love to institute some kind of version of Cyrano de Bergerac involving a player character to play Cyrano, so that they could actually help out the NPC, the star-crossed lover and so forth and so on. So actually just adapting that in some way.
Yeah. Another possibility, if you want to move away from the romance, love affair kind of angle, because I know that not everybody is down with that, which is cool. Dealing more with the creative aspects of things, you've got in Europa the challenge, the theatrical competition that comes up. You could have other kinds of arts competitions or that kind of thing that Devotees or maybe a Questor of Astendar is hosting some kind of artistic tournament or challenge of some sort, and all of the potential backstabbing or skullduggery and things like that, perhaps where, there's a favorite that is working on some kind of secret project and his rivals are trying to figure out what's going on, or maybe hire to gather intelligence or perhaps to sabotage or something like that. Because one of the things is that the Passions don't necessarily play favorites as long as people are devoted to their ideals. They don't necessarily have a problem with their devotees coming into conflict with each other. It's not all necessarily one big happy family. And so you could have rival Questors of Astendar that are working on some kind of different projects. Again, you're dealing with intrigue and interactions and politics and
the soft role playing versus the hard combat of dice rolls. I love all these ideas for Astendar, and I think it's time to kind of get down to, okay, so you've got somebody who wants to now have their discipline to follow, and that now they also want to kind of follow along the secondary path of being a questor for Astendar. And they go about that, and they make a declaration with their game master. Game master's okay with that. So what's in it for them? What kind of powers do they get? Shall we run down the list real quick?
Yeah. So generally speaking, their progression is divided up into 3 tiers as opposed to the 4. But those 3 tiers are roughly equivalent to the novice, journeyman, and warden tiers of adepts. Questors don't get quite as high as adepts do. The way that the Questor devotion, the way that the Questor talent works is that you become a Questor, you get this ability called Questor that determines how devoted you are to the passion. And it works in some ways similar to versatility for humans. Your rank in Questor determines how many powers, which for Questors are called devotions, you can learn under that, and there is a list similar to the talent options list that adepts get that basically says what you can do. And at each sort of rank of Questor, you also maybe get some bonuses like defense bonuses or whatever. Questors also get access to a pool of devotion points, which are similar to karma, dice that can be used in service of specific tasks. So they can spend them on any of their Questor powers. They can also spend them similar to the karma abilities that adepts get, like, for example, the weaponsmith ability to spend karma on crafting something. They get special abilities. The devotion die for Questors starts at a D4, goes to a D6, and goes to a D8. So it kind of progresses a little
tiers,
bit faster based on those tiers. But yeah, they basically, you get the ability within your devotion, in your sort of path in following this passion, to customize what approach, what angle. Now, some of the powers that they get are identical, mechanically speaking, to talents that already exist in the game where it makes sense. But there are also some additional things
unique to each
that are special and unique and available.
And the only other difference between their devotion pool and their karma pool is that the karma pool replenishes daily. The devotion pool does not. They have to actually do the devotion deeds to get those points.
Yeah, that's a sort of mechanically incentivized role-playing, is that there is a maximum number of points that a Questor can have at any one time. But if their pool is not full, they can do something in service of the passion's ideals that can be rewarded with replenishing points. And the number of points that can be granted is based on kind of bringing back the old, minor, major, and zealous acts of devotion that were described in previous editions. You refill your devotion pool, you refill that pool of bonus dice by doing things that are in service to your passion. So you get these dice, but if you want to continue to have those available, you need to be doing things that are going to replenish it. And I really like that interaction of a mechanical benefit for a role-playing activity. It's
the conscious reminder to act out the ideals of the passion you're following. And you need to incorporate that into your role-playing, not just your dice rolling. And so the 3 tiers for all the passions are follower, adherent, and then finally exemplar. So the follower devotions for Astendar, and we've heard most of these before. You get acting. This is your pool to draw from for the abilities you'd like to have. So if you become a follower of Astendar, you can choose acting, artist, conversation, emotion song, empathic sense, entertainer, first impression, impressive display, winning smile. Those are all the ones you've heard of before, but Passions Empowerment, I think, is the only new one here.
Yes. Passions Empowerment allows the Questor to grant devotion points and the dice associated with them to other people. Like, one of the things that comes up in a lot of the stories and the fiction in Earthdawn with regards to the passions is how the passions and the Questors inspire Namegivers to go
to do those
beyond in pursuit of the ideals of that passion. And so basically what that allows the Questor to do is to say, I am going to grant this bit of power, this bit of energy that I have from my passion to you, and then that grants the individual dice that they can add on to their normal tests. But it needs to be done in pursuit of those ideals. And so a Questor of Astendar who is perhaps use this ability to inspire a non-Questor minstrel to compose a great work or something like that. And so grants them a die or multiple dice, depending on how things work, so that while the individual is pursuing that goal, they have the power of the passion pushing them even further and potentially allowing them to excel beyond what their normal abilities would allow.
You're there to help them for Astendar. You're to inspire them.
One of the other things that comes up a lot with the Questor powers is that they grant additional bonuses to non-adepts that are not provided to adepts, because adepts already have magic. They don't need things on top of it. So a Questor who uses that on a Troubadour adept just provides the dice as a bonus. If they do it on a mundane, a non-adept minstrel, not only do they get the dice, but they also get the Questor's rank as a bonus to the test on top of it. So there's a lot of cases where you'll see, and non-adepts get this extra thing on top of
so it's encouraging the player character in the role of Questor to engage with the NPC that the game master has put in their path and help them along. So especially for Astendar, it's the inspiration.
Yeah. And this is also where, and again, this is like sort of a great example of there's a mechanical thing, but a Questor who is more devoted, who is more in tune and more dedicated to their passions ideals, reflected by having a higher Questor rank, provides more and bigger bonuses to people that they are able to convey, right? The example that's in the Questor's book says, okay, this Questor of Garland has rank 6. And so they can provide up to 6 points distributed however they wish among people within the range of the ability. And non-adepts gain a +6 bonus to acts that they take using that in pursuit of those ideals. So if you're talking about Garland, who we'll talk about in a later episode, but who is like especially about the defense of home and hearth in addition to the other sort of familial things, if you grant that power to the people defending the wall of the village from the vicious Skull War graders, like they are going to be empowered by this divine energy to act above and beyond what they normally would. So, like, again, creating mechanics that reflect the narrative that has been provided in previous
it's a
works.
Wonderfully intricate system that relies on each half to work. So that's the follower devotions. The adherent devotions are a little bit more new, because only a couple of those look familiar, like diplomacy, lasting impression. That's pretty much it. So assess intentions, Astendar's muse, Astendar's voice, enchanted gift, passion's insight, and passion's inspiration are all Questor powers that, as far as I can tell, do not have any overlay with talents.
Yep. Assess intentions is actually a knack that's in the companion. So it functions similar to like learning Nax's skills. We had talked about that before. So that's something that is available to adepts who have the appropriate, I think it might be an empathic sense knack. I don't know right off the top of my head. I don't have the companion right in front of me. I just was looking in the Questor's book and it says, as the knack, Earthdawn companion, page 89.
Under diplomacy. Yes.
It's a diplomacy knack? Okay. They're listed by supervising talent in the book. It makes sense that it's a diplomacy knack, actually. That it allows the person using the ability to do exactly what it says, which is get to assess the intentions of whoever that they're targeting. Astendar's muse is basically like the actual sort of muse ability. Like you talk to an artist about their art, and then you can make them obsessive about completing a particular work and maybe get bonuses as a result of that. Astendar's voice inspires the target with the passion's charm, and they gain bonuses to tests made to create favorable impression or advance the cause of the arts or love. The Questors, some of them at least, get a few abilities that actually enhance interaction tests, which is something that a lot of adept magic doesn't tend to do very much. And that Astendar's voice bonus from that can be applied to appropriate interaction tests, but also diplomacy or first impression or anything like that.
Passion's insight and passion's inspiration.
These are sort of generic. Passion's insight basically allows the Questor to detect whether somebody is feeling emotions related to the passion's area of focus.
Yes.
Was the other one passion's inspiration? The Questor basically talks and inspires people, granting bonuses to tests that they make in service of that thing.
Those ideals.
Larger bonus for non-adepts and compared to adepts.
So yeah, lots of interaction with the other NPCs, or, if you're trying to help out your party a little bit, these aren't bad either. So those are the first 2 tiers. The third tier is the exemplar devotions, and a couple of these, again, sound familiar, like bardic voice and disarming smile, I think is something along the lines of maybe a knack from... Yep.
Yeah, that's it. That's
so then we get to Fertility's Season, since it is Astendar.
Basically, by doing a little ritual, the Questor makes it more likely that people in the sanctified area are able to conceive.
And Live in Bloom. Oh.
Love in Bloom.
That's a misprint.
You're right. There is a typo in the list on page 140.
I read it correctly.
So you read it correctly.
That's okay.
We just have a typo.
Love in Bloom.
So it's love in bloom. The Questor enchants a flower, making all those within range more courageous and receptive to matters of the heart. Affected targets are more interested in love, relationships, and romance. This devotion cannot force anyone to do something they are opposed to, but maybe open their eyes to seeing things in a new way. See, we've got the consent thing in there. For each success, adepts gain +1 to tests and -1 to social defense, while non-adepts gain +2 and -2. Creates a magical flower that makes everybody in the area
yeah.
It's
the genie. I can't make you fall in love, but here's a wish.
The other one that's there is Silence Influence, and this is something that a few passions get. This is sort of the Questor equivalent of Dispel Magic, in that it allows Questors to stop ongoing devotions or other passion-derived activity. So it is narrowly focused on a particular, only on passion magic, on Questor magic. And obviously it's only available at high ranks because that generally means that you've got to get the passion itself involved in what's going on. But that's basically how that works, is it allows you to stop the influence of another passion.
And then the last one you get, last option you get for Exemplar is Thought Link.
Yeah, Thought Link is a talent.
Sounds right. Obviously a higher circle talent we've covered so far.
No, it's in the player's guide. It's 173. Yeah, Thought Link is basically telepathy.
Love that.
Yeah.
So Astendar actually puts together a pretty good Questor if you want to play one. Or add that to your discipline. So what do we think about actually people just making a Questor only and not playing a discipline? Is that going to be a larger challenge?
Yes. Yeah, it would be, because Questors do not get as many magical abilities as adepts do, right? They get one devotion per rank in Questor, so they can't ever have more than maximum 12, and that's if they're most devoted to their chosen passion. Whereas adepts get 6 talents right off the bat and access to another 6 by the time they're through their novice tier. So adepts get a lot more access to magical powers, and the abilities that a Questor gets are a lot more tuned toward that passion's devotions and goals. And so for most of the passions, you're not necessarily going to see a lot of the defensive abilities even that are available to most adepts, even in their options like Avoid Blow and whatnot. And so if you're going to have a character in the group that is just going to be a Questor, okay, the other drawback is that pure Questors don't get durability.
Yeah.
Most of them. Like, it's not built in.
Not built into Astendars, yeah.
There is, I think, let me just double check here real quickly. I don't remember whether they do or not. Yes, some Questors do have a durability devotion that they provide, but not all of them. So you'll need to keep that in mind, that Questors generally do not tend to be as robust as even mid-circle spellcasters might be, unless they have access to the durability devotion and devote one of their slots to it. So you'll want to keep that in mind. You'll need to provide them a lot more opportunity to learn and raise up skills. Provided that you give them the support that they need, it is certainly possible for a Questor character to be playable on its own, but there are several considerations that you would need to take into account. Depending on what passion they follow, their general survivability in terms of the traditional kind of combat encounters that you would have for an adept group. For an example, we're talking about Astendar here. Astendar does not grant the durability devotion.
Yeah.
It's not one of the things that's available. And so thinking that, because they are a questor of rank 7, they can run with journeyman adepts. Well, they're not going to have the death and unconsciousness ratings that are going to allow them to stand up to things that, that adepts would be able to. If you're aware of that going in, and the player is aware of it going in, and you're designing a game that kind of goes around that, it's certainly doable. Maybe as a mini series or something like that, as opposed to a long-term campaign. You would want to be careful about how you're handling that, depending on the passion that the character is going to be following. On the other hand, a questor supporter or NPC or something like that can provide some support in other areas, especially if you've got a smaller group that might not have the triumvirate of things covered. You've got the physical, like Swordmaster warrior type thing, and the mystic with a spellcaster, but you don't have a troubadour or some other kind of social type character. Having an NPC that's like a questor of Astendar or something who doesn't have the physical prowess to perhaps
contribute,
run the risk of
overshadowing somebody,
of overshadowing someone in their area of expertise, it could potentially be useful.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, the design for questors kind of serves a couple of purposes. One, it is built in a way that allows adepts, that allows player characters who want to be devoted to a passion to be able to do that and gain access to some cool and unique and flavorful abilities based on their path. But it also is constructed so that as NPCs, there is some greater framework for what they would be doing within the setting and the type of things that their stories and legends and reputation would take along with them. It kind of serves a double duty there, and I'm happy with how the mechanics came out. Anybody who has looked at paths will see the influence that the questor rules had on paths. Morgan kind of went a little bit even beyond that, but I remember the meeting that we had where we were brainstorming how all of this was going to work, and devotion and all of that. We sat down in some secluded corner at Gen Con at one point and sat for a couple of hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that, and just hashed out a lot of the basic framework. And then he kind of went and ran with that further in terms of the mechanical aspect of it, while I herded the freelancers who, like you, wrote the essays and whatnot that came.
So on to Jaspree, since we got a few more minutes left to go.
Yeah, if we kind of run through Jaspree here real quickly, we don't need to devote quite the attention that we have with Astendar, because we've been kind of sidetracking into general stuff about questors. We're going to
muddle our way through the questors in general, and we'll shoehorn this. We'll condense it down. I'll take out a lot of the dead space, so we've got some time. But since we had to talk about the first passion in the first questor, we had to kind of overarch everything and kind of shoehorn in what all of that's about, and then we can talk about Astendar. So now we did that. Let's talk about Jaspree, whose ideals are growth and care of the land, love of the wilderness. So all things nature and beauty, the elements.
Which is to say the natural beauty of the living world, a majestic vista of mountains or
flowers
or waterfall, or the beauty of a forest and that sort of thing. That is the growth and life, as opposed to the constructed
the Namegiver invented, the inspired beauty. Yeah.
Namegiver.
So in Jaspree is more,
the
elements are like trees and farms and forests and seeds and flowers. And so not only just the individual petals of the flower, but the makeup of the flower itself, and then the whole garden of flowers, and then the whole forest of trees. And so it's every little thing, the micro and the macro beauty of nature.
Again, because the Greek ones come off the top of my head so easily, because I've been playing a lot of Hades, which is a great game. Gaia,
yes,
the Mother Earth, is a strong association there. Demeter is another one. Any kind of deity of the harvest, or not even necessarily of the harvest, but of wild. I would even perhaps see a little bit of an association, perhaps with Pan, Chiron, the legendary centaur trainer of heroes and stuff from Greek myths. I kind of, there's a little bit maybe of an association there. But yeah, of the wild places and so forth. The Jaspree is one of those that when you kind of look at the passions and the ideas of them being representations of ideals, Jaspree doesn't actually quite fit that because of its strong association with the wilderness. But they also are associated with farming and careful and appropriate use of the land.
Yeah.
It's not just wild, unchecked growth. It's appropriate stewardship and care of the land.
Because Jaspree knows that you have to cut down the wheat to make it into flour to eat. You have to trim the vegetables to feed those. But there's a conservation aspect to that. You can cut down a tree to make your logs.
Right.
Just plant more seeds to grow more trees. And so it's the give and take. Yeah.
It's the
give
circle
and take
of life.
of nature and our relationship with it. So and the powers that Jaspree brings. And one of my favorite parts of the old Earthdawn journal would be I think Andrew Ragland's contribution where he would the children of Jaspree introduce new creatures and new beasts in the wild, good or bad, take your pick. But they were still children of Jaspree because he's not just about plants. He's about the fauna as well. So he's all about the creatures that inhabit the area. So his or her powers, Jaspree, is to animate plants, speak with animals, and he can move through dirt like a shark in the ocean. He's that fast. Which reminds me of Terrax from Marvel Comics. But anyway, one of those things.
Yeah, we had talked about the association that Astendar strongly has associated typically with troubadours and swordmasters in some respects. Jaspree would be strongly associated with beastmasters. Obviously, the shaman, I think, while more spirit-based, would be very strongly tied with Jaspree. Cavalrymen, maybe not so much because of their focus on a single mount traditionally. But I think that...
Yeah, a little bit lesser than, but not excluded from.
Right. But there's still that relationship and that give and take with a living being that I could definitely see a cavalryman being maybe not necessarily a questor, but would honor Jaspree and would try and potentially have their relationship with their mount be one of a positive kind of give and take, appropriate stewardship and care.
My mom is a questor of Jaspree because her garden has so many flowers and tomato plants and corn and just the way she's designed it and the way she's cultivated it and the way she clears out the debris every single autumn for the spring growth. It's amazing. So she's had the greenest thumb I've ever known. But if you're going to play, so if there's a questor out there for an NPC, this is your gardener, this is your herder, this is your farmer. So somebody who takes care of nature, encourages the growth, the respect of nature, the recycling of everything. This is your tree hugger, essentially. Again, not always to be adepts, but one of those things. So I think working in a questor of Jaspree for a game master is a little bit easier than a few others because nature's all around.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned earlier that there is a group of questors of Jaspree that is devoted to restoring the damage caused by the scourge in the Badlands. But that is something that can be done anywhere. Anywhere that either the actions of the horrors or where the actions of Namegivers are being driven perhaps by greed that result in the destruction of the natural places as opposed to being more in harmony with it. Like a kind of strip mining situation would be something that would potentially be an offense to Jaspree. And so having questors of Jaspree seeking out the aid of adepts to kill a horror that maybe is causing problems for a town or plaguing its crops or whatever. You know, one of the things that we tried to do, and we'll talk about this a little bit more maybe with some of the other questors where the essay in the questors book is a little bit atypical, is that when you get somebody who is that, especially when you get into high-ranking questors, somebody who is that devoted and that focused to a particular ideal, they can get a little weird. But that just because a questor follows one of the traditional passions, one of the non-mad passions, does not necessarily mean that they will not be an antagonist, that their goals and their objectives will not necessarily run counter to the adepts. It might be that you could have a questor of Jaspree that maybe is so devoted to protecting a particular grove. The essay in the book kind of talks about this as, a lot of people have, this idea of the questors of Jaspree as living in wild groves and chasing people off and whatnot. That's not necessarily the case, and the essay kind of goes on to explain how Jaspree is in all things and so forth. Like a lot of these essays go, think about these other ways that this passion's ideals maybe relate to your daily life. But that you could have a cave troll or something like that, maybe like a more primitive or degraded type of individual who is still a name giver in a sense and is able to follow and be devoted to the passions, but maybe doesn't have the civilization
societal aspects or societal aspects to their life, and so might be not in favor of a group of questors coming around,
foresters coming in and harvesting some of the wood for
making a house or
for lumbering or making a house or whatever. And so then might be rallying the creatures of the area to cause problems for, like, summoning small woodland creatures to go and ruin crops and things like that. And so you could have a questor, an antagonist, whose goals maybe in one sense are understandable, that might be or noble from a certain point of view, but that is potentially causing problems for other people that might seek the aid of adepts.
Yeah, I can see a questor of Jaspree high enough, the exemplar being like an eco terrorist.
Potentially, yeah. Hopefully the essays kind of contribute to a recognition that some of these individuals are not, like, in order to be that focused on a particular ideal and goal, that it can kind of make you a little squirrely.
So let's get down to the nitty gritty on being a questor of Jaspree. If one wanted to follow along that path, the follower and adherent and exemplar devotions. The follower devotions are going to read like a list of things we've come across before, except for maybe a couple of them. Animal bond is a power you get. Awareness, creature analysis, danger sense, dominate beast, passions empowerment. We talked about with Astendar a minute ago. Stealthy stride, tracking and wilderness survival. Friend of the land, I think, is the new one.
Yeah, Friend of the Land basically allows the questor, through their connection and devotion to Jaspree, to basically get free bonuses on wilderness survival.
Never hurts. It's a lot of wilderness out there in Barsave.
Friend of the Land acts as an additional wilderness survival test that they can make at the same time, and so gain additional successes within that same time frame that a normal wilderness survival test would. Yeah, they know how to survive, whether that's finding water or food or shelter or anything like that. They basically get additional successes.
So the adherent devotions, your second tier. Again, a little familiar. Animal talk. Beast summons, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. Call animal companion. Heal animal companion. Safe path. Those are all familiar. Awaken the wood. Not what you mean.
Awaken the wood.
Awaken?
Awaken the wood, as in the woods, basically allows the questor to animate plants. They imbue a plant with Jaspree's energy, allowing it to awaken and obey basic
tree
instructions.
Branches can grab people type stuff. Vines and things.
This is the kind of typical, like, druid plant grasp. Like, if you think of plant mages, plant magic, that's the kind of thing that this can do. Like animating vines to wrap around people's
ankles,
wrists, or perhaps
tree roots can come up and grab your ankles.
Move plants, tree roots, or even like moving plants aside to open a path and then move back afterwards to block it.
Path magic.
We didn't get into big depth about it, but last week when we were talking about Bloodwood, we talked about path magic.
This is exactly it.
Like this kind of similar sort of thing that path magic can do, a questor of Jaspree can do using this devotion. Basically kind of reshaping the environment around them to waylay or delay or cause problems for people.
Exactly. And then bloom and flourish.
I'm pretty sure that's just a bonus to like growing stuff. Yeah. Causes plants to grow at an unnatural rate. If successful, an area with up to rank times 10 yards experiences a week of growth in 10 minutes.
I like that.
It also makes the area exceptionally fertile, doubling future growth in the affected area for 1 month per success. Cool. There is a limit to how often it can be used in a given area, and it doesn't allow plants that can't otherwise grow there to grow there. This is the sort of thing like if there was a devastating forest fire that went through an area, they could use this to like help spur the regrowth of new plants and so forth.
Very nice. And of course they get Passions Inspiration, which I think all questers get at the adherent level. So the exemplar devotions, we have animal leadership, which again, we've covered before as a talent. Empathic command we've covered before as well. Plant talk sounds really almost self-explanatory. So really, fertility's season. I think it was, we talked about that because Astendar gets it. But this is one where it basically does that same sort of fecundity effect, but for animals. Well put. Jaspree's Solace.
Oh, I think this is one of these really awesome. Yeah. Jaspree's Solace allows the questor to reduce corruption in an area.
Nice.
Basically, an area that is corrupted or polluted or tainted by the horrors, they can use this high-ranking questor ability to slowly and over time reduce the corruption in an area.
This reminds me of like purifiers.
Yeah.
The old discipline.
It causes them damage to do this. Mm-hmm. They suffer like as if they were casting a spell using raw magic. But it basically allows them to transfer corruption points from an area into their own pattern.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And then those points, those corruption points are lost over time. They lose 1 point a month. But it's like a high power. Like, obviously there are questors of Jaspree that are devoted to healing the damage in the Badlands. This is the kind of power that allows them to do that. But it's a high devotion and costly and time-consuming process.
Yeah. Because you do. And then the last exemplar devotion that a questor of Jaspree could get would be Shield the Innocent.
So similar to the Nethermancer spell, Life Circle of One, Shield the Innocent allows the questor to create a magical barrier that prevents attackers from crossing it. And basically, if they try and the repelling is successful, then they get flung back and knocked down and harried and whatnot.
Yeah, that's all right. That's a nice little power to have. Keep the garden safe.
And similar to Life Circle of One, each instance can only be triggered once per round, so it is possible to get overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. So generally, for more robust defenses, you kind of stack them.
Well, yeah,
to potentially prevent it from being overrun.
That sounds awesome. So I think I started off with two rather, I can say easy passions, but these are the ones that I think would be easiest to work in for anybody to interact with the NPCs. I mean, you have love, art, and music for Astendar, and then for Jaspree is nature and growth and animals. Those are all really prevalent.
And farms and the appropriate use and stewardship of the land.
Yes. So I think those are two easy ones to kind of work in, maybe to whet the appetite of one of your players to maybe want to follow in this path and become a questor and gain some of those powers, and or how to maybe give an adventure hook for incorporating the ideals of Astendar or Jaspree into your campaign as a little side thing, a little flavor text, a little underlying notion of what might be coming up later on in an adventure of some kind. So any final thoughts on Passions or Questors at the moment, Josh?
I think that passions are really interesting and worth exploring as something in your game, especially looking at the mad passions. People don't necessarily have a problem with looking at the mad passions and going, "Oh, these are the cults of the evil whatever." And you kind of build adventures around finding out about a plot, spoiling it kind of thing.
Yeah. Those are three easy antagonists.
As the kind of writings and essays in the Questor's book and in other places, but especially in the Questor's book talk about, is that the Questors are, like I said earlier, that link between the mundane and the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
That they are that that sort of spiritual link that the common folk of Barsave have with these divine, for lack of a better term, these divine spiritual beings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is, generally speaking, I think you can end up with a much richer experience and a richer game if you explore them and see about ways to bring them into your game.
Yeah.
Even if they're not necessarily a focus of ways that you can deal with that.
Yeah, you can lace them in here and there. I mean, they shouldn't necessarily overtake a campaign, or maybe one campaign can be centered around them, or like I said, just plant the seeds, Jaspree's words, Jaspree will provide, to let somebody understand that there is something outside of their discipline that they may also want to explore and further flesh out and round out their character.
Yeah, and especially Questors of Garland,
mm-hmm.
and Garland is common and popular because they're the one associated with healing.
Yes.
And so frequently that's what adepts are after. It's like, oh, hey, more healing powers, more healing stuff, more healing ability.
Need those.
We want that.
Yeah, need that hanging with my homie.
And missing out on, like we discussed with Astendar or Jaspree, and how we'll talk about some of the others as we go along through this series.
Yeah, so we kind of fumbled our way into talking about the Questors and the Passions themselves. With a nice little overarch on all of the Passions and all of the Questors and how they kind of operate. So this one's a little bit longer than necessary as far as a podcast is concerned. They will get a little bit tighter because we won't have to do that overarching thing for both of those ideas later on. But we'll cut out some dead fat or some dead air on this one, a little bit of the fat, and trim it down. Otherwise, folks, if you have any questions for us about Passions, Questors, Astendar, or Jaspree, let us know. Feel free to get a hold of us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. We will have more in this eventually 6-part series. If we can get 2 done per episode, I think we're in good shape.
Don't forget, again, the weekend of February 19th through 21st, FreedoniaCon. Mm-hmm. Visit facetgames.com for more information on that. And if you can, come and hang out with us on Sunday the 21st for our live recording so that we can answer questions and things like that. That episode, if you did not catch the live recording, we are planning to have go up in the feed as normal.
Yeah.
So that will be the next episode that you hear here.
I look forward to the Earthdawn quiz lightning round that they offer us in the feed.
There are going to be over the course of the weekend, I think there's going to be a trivia contest.
Oh, I'm going to fail
or
at
something.
That. I've forgotten most of the trivia.
It's FASA trivia, not just Earthdawn trivia.
Oh yeah, nope. I'm going to get my nope, not a contender. Admittedly, not a contender. So will not stand on my own. Okay, folks, until next time, hopefully on the weekend you'll see us and or hear us, and the next time you'll definitely be contacting us. So once again, edsgpodcast@gmail.com. It is time for you to go quest after your own legend.
Good night, everybody.